Okay, it is 10 a.m. and we're going to come out of our brief break. Let the record reflect that we have all three commissioners present, and we are moving into our continued levy budget discussion for the 2021 budget. And at this point, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Maceo.
Thank you very much, Chairman French. As Chairman French indicated, whenever the board fixes the county budget for the subsequent year, it's a two-step process. Firstly, we determine the amount of increased revenue which we're going to levy in 2020 for collection in 2021. And then based upon that, the board holds a public hearing to adopt their budget. As the board is aware, our budget hearing is next Monday at 10 o'clock a.m. As the board will recall, on November 16th, 2020, the Board of County Commissioners held a public hearing to consider, number one, increasing the tax revenue from 2020 to 2021, and number two, finding a substantial need in order to provide expected, in order to satisfy expected expenses and obligations in conjunction with the general fund, the road fund, and conservation futures. As the board is aware, state law limits the amount of revenue which the board can collect in a subsequent year by a term called the limit factor. The limit factor for taxing districts having 10,000 or more people is 1% or the implicit price deflator. The implicit price deflator, board members, is the inflationary figure that the federal government comes up with. This year, the implicit price deflator for 2021 is 0.60152%. Accordingly, based upon state law, the board can collect in 2021 0.60% more revenue than it collected in 1920. However, realizing that this amount of additional revenue would not enable the board to carry out their normal functions, the legislature has provided that the county commissioners and other legislative bodies, by a majority vote, can increase the amount of money collected above the implicit price deflator, i.e. 0.60% to 1% in calendar year 2021. In conjunction with the November 16th public hearing, staff advertised increasing the amount of revenue to be collected in 2021 over 20 by an additional 1% in the general fund, the conservation futures, and the road fund. And the 1% is calculated on the highest levy that the board could have levied in the last 3 years. In addition to advertising going to the 1%, which requires a substantial need determination by the board, staff also advertised shifting money from the county road fund to the county general fund. State law allows the Board of County Commissioners to shift bank capacity, if you will, from the road fund to the general fund. In the hearing held on November 16th, staff had proposed declaring a substantial need, raising revenue by 1% in all three funds, and we'd also proposed shifting $5.5 million from the road fund to the general fund. After considering certain public testimony, the Board of County Commissioners directed that we continue the public hearing and advertise a potential shift of $6.1 million from the road fund to the general fund. And so the purpose of today's public hearing is for the Board of County Commissioners to again consider public testimony on one, declaring a substantial need and authorizing the Board of County Commissioners to use the limit factor of 1% in increasing the amount of revenue to be collected in 2021 over 2020 in the general fund, the road fund, and conservation futures. And number two, to increase the amount of tax revenue to be collected in 2020 from 2021, which would include not only the 1% increase, but also the shift. I have prepared two separate packets of information, board members. Packet one, which is identified as such, would require two motions from the board. One, declaring a substantial need, and two, increasing the amount of revenue to be collected in 2021 over 2020 by not only the 1%, but a shift of $5.5 million from the road fund to the general fund. Packet two is very similar, except it proposes not only the substantial need of going to 1%, but it proposes a shift of $6.1 million from the road fund to the general fund. Commissioner Cuney at the last meeting requested that staff provide her with the increase in the property tax if the board adopted a shift of $5.5 million or a shift of $6.1 million. And if the board adopts a shift of $5.5 million, your levy specialists has advised that that would increase the property tax approximately 9 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. If the board adopted the proposed shift of $6.1 million, it would increase the taxes approximately 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So Commissioner French, I apologize for that taking so much time, but I would now turn it back to the board for the chairperson to continue to get comments from the board members and then to take public testimony on the two items that I have identified.
Thank you, Mr. Amacio. So any questions for Mr. Amacio? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Mary?
Okay, so packet one versus packet two, Jim, it's the 6.1, were we not going to take the 1% in the road fund?
Commissioner Cuney, packet two does take the 1%, if you will, in all three funds. But under packet two, the 1% is part of the shift from the road fund to the general fund, to the best of my knowledge. And we have Mr. Loomer on the phone if I've misstated that.
Okay, Mr. Loomer.
Yes, had to find my unmute button. Yeah, that's essentially correct. Because my understanding was that we wouldn't add 1% to the road fund in packet two, then take the part of the 6.1 million shift and in the budget process or in the budget line items, move money to the road fund.
I guess just to clarify, Option 2 is doing the 6.1, but we're not taking the 1% in the road fund. We're only taking the 1% in the general fund and the conservation futures fund. Because instead of taking the 1% in the road fund, we're shifting that
Yes, we were taking it.
shift. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because
Commissioner,
that's how it's stated.
Commissioner CUNY, Dave, correct me again. We are taking the 1% in the proposed packet, Commissioner CUNY, in all three funds. Of course, we need to declare a substantial need to do that. But in the road district, instead of them keeping that money and spending it, we're going to include that as part of what we're shifting over to the general fund.
Yes, and adding 1% to the, well, let me take a look here. Adding 1% to the last year's levy would still put you above the highest lawful that's allowed by shifting 6.1 million away. So instead of adding 0% or 1%, just means that limit is either higher, a little bit higher if it's 1%, but it's either with 0%, it's still above the highest lawful limit that's calculated with shifting 6.1 million. If that
Okay,
makes
but I
sense.
thought I guess I thought we weren't doing the 1%, so it allowed for further bank capacity in the future.
Well, the bank capacity is controlled by the highest lawful, and the substantial need is what would raise that by 1%. Because the bank capacity is the difference between what you actually levy and what the highest lawful says you can levy. So if you were to not pass a substantial need, your highest lawful would be a little bit smaller, and then that would eat into, would decrease your bank capacity.
So,
Yeah,
Mary, if I could jump in here, in the discussions that I've had with both Gary Petrovich and Jim Amacio, we are doing this year what we did last year. We are banking the 1% for the road fund. We're not going to take the 1% in the road fund, but we're shifting that to the general fund. And then out of the general fund, we will backfill money back into the road fund, which will actually net more money in the road fund than taking the 1% in the road fund. So it's exactly the same thing that we did last year to be able to get more money into roads.
But if I look at these resolutions or these motions, we're taking the 1% in the road fund as well. We're not, there's no banking of it.
Commissioner CUNY, and again, please correct me, Mr. Loomer. Staff has proposed declaring a substantial need and increasing the amount of revenue 1% above the highest we could have levied over the last 3 years in all three funds, Commissioner CUNY, not just the general fund and conservation futures, but also the road fund. But as Commissioner French alluded to, that amount of money is going to be, and Dave Loomer, I think, confirmed this, is going to be part of the shift of the $6.1 million from the road fund to the general fund. And I think there's a kind of confusion a little bit on the word bank capacity. Bank capacity doesn't necessarily mean the 1%. It is the difference between what you did levy and what you could have levied. So every year that number changes, Commissioner CUNY. I've been confused about that, and I think Mr. Loomer finally has explained it to me. Dave, did I say that correctly?
yes, The analogy I like to say is, if you had a credit card with a $10,000 limit and you borrow $8,000, then in that sense, your bank capacity would be the $2,000 that you could have levied, that you could have used, but you chose not to. It's the same thing with the highest lawful is a number that you're allowed to levy. And if you choose to levy less than it, then the difference is bank capacity. And what affects the highest lawful is the 1%, the difference between the 1% or the IPD in any given year plus new construction and state assessed. So that highest lawful is like a credit limit that keeps rising each year by 1% plus new construction, et cetera. And what you choose to levy in any given year, the difference is bank capacity.
Okay.
So if you levy more this year, your bank capacity is less, but then if you levy less next year, your bank capacity will increase, or vice versa.
Okay. Did that help, Mary?
But I'm just trying to figure it out. So if I look at the resolution for option 2, because I thought you were saying we're still taking the 1%, but as it reads, motion number 2, it talks about the general fund being 1.5 increase in revenues.
Commissioner Cooney, I had the same question, and I asked Mr. Loomer that, and Mr. Loomer, Commissioner Cooney is looking at packet number 2, and which would propose an increase of 1.5% in revenue in the general fund from last year with an amount of $956,944. Can you comment on the increase of being 1.5%, please?
Yes, that percentage is the percentage from uses last year's actual levy and how much you want to increase last year's actual levy. And so since we're increasing, with the increase in the levy shift of this year of 6.1 million, you need to increase last year's levy a little more than 1% in order to cover the increase in the levy shift.
So
And
using,
this is just, basically it's a guarantee that all the money that you're shifting from road to the general fund gets collected, that your resolution for increase value is not less than what the shift gives you. It's always the smallest of the highest lawful, the resolution for increase, and the certification, levy certification. The lowest of those 3 numbers is what you're actually allowed to levy. And this is just basically a guarantee to make sure that the lawful is what you'll be getting as a levy.
so Mr. Loomer, using your analogy with regard to the credit card, doing the substantial need and establishing the maximum levy rate is like taking your $10,000 credit card and increasing the amount of funds that you can borrow from 10,000 to 11,000. But how much of that you use is when we actually establish the levy to be collected for next year and stuff. So is that a fair kind of extension of your analogy?
Yes, and yeah, and it's not exactly oranges to oranges kind of thing, but your resolution for increase is what you actually levied last year and how much you want to increase it this year. So if you're increasing your limit, then you want to increase the amount that you're borrowing in a sense. If you're increasing your limit, say 10,000 to 11,000, but if you're only increasing the amount you want to borrow by limiting by some less than that, then you wouldn't be getting the full amount of what the highest lawful allows you. And it's just, there are different limitations that have to be compared with each other.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I guess it's just there's a certain uncomfort to option 2 in that saying that we're going to be increasing of 1.5% when we're when we're limited to 1%. in last year's,
Two different numbers.
I mean, I guess we did take the 1% in each of them and did the shift, but I don't know. This has gotten.
Mr.
No.
Mason,
With the general levy, you're not limited to one, you're limited to 1% in the highest lawful calculation. But in the actual levy, which is about this 1.5% is increasing, because you're want to cover the 1% increase in the highest lawful plus the shift of the 6.1 million. So you're adding that much more to your highest lawful limit. So you need to make sure your actual levy is a little bit higher than that if you want to guarantee that you get what the levy shift would provide. You know, it's two different numbers, and you want to make sure, you know, there's different limits, and you want to make sure that the amount that you want, if that's the highest loss of the shift, you want to make sure you get that money. The other limit needs to be a little bit higher.
Commissioner French, I think Commissioner CUNY's question is this, Dave. Most taxing districts are declaring a substantial need and increasing the amount of revenue they collect from the highest amount for the last 3 years by the 1%. The city of Spokane just did that the other day, if I recall. Commissioner CUNY's question is, well, Mr. Amacio, if you're increasing 1%, but yet the resolution that the board passed shows 1.5%, that's going to be confusing to the public. That's her question, I think, because it looks like we're increasing it 1.5 in the general fund instead of 1%. Is that correct, Commissioner CUNY?
Yes, because I'm going to have a hard time. I mean, you know, doing more than what we did last year. I mean, this should be, you know, not putting more of a burden on our taxpayers than what we did last year. You know, so that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's going to look like we're adding, you know, more, and I didn't think that was the reality of what we were doing. We were, you know, shifting it from not doing the 1% of the road fund, bringing it, you know, shifting that back over, but it was, you know, just that 1 cent difference. But when you see 1.5% now in the general fund, that's going to, you know, I think it's just going to be confusing to the general public.
So, Mr. Loomer, again, and I understand Commissioner CUNY's concern because it is going to be confusing and it's hard to explain to the public why we're declaring a substantial need and increasing the revenue by 1% in all three funds. Yet, when we certify the amount to be collected, it's going to be 1 1/2%. And I think it's kind of apples and oranges, is it not, Mr. Loomer? Mr. Loomer?
Yes, it is. And actually, if you drop that percentage from 1.5 to 1.0%, it's really not going to affect that I'm looking at it. Because when you add in new construction and assessed, it still gives that, with a 1% increase, it gives that levy limitation, resolution for increase limitation, still is slightly above the highest lawful.
okay.
So technically, I mean, you change it from 1.5 to 1% in that, and it really wouldn't affect how much you're going to actually collect.
I'll find out more.
Okay. Yeah, he just was trying to provide.
Hopefully that's not more cause more confusion.
Is everyone else getting the same echo that I'm getting?
Yeah, so if you're not part of the conversation, could you make sure that you're turned on to mute? We're getting an echo and feedback, and it's very difficult. Thank you. All right, Mr. Maceo.
Chairman French, Mr. Loomer, I think what I heard you say is, looking at packet number 2 motions, in particular, packet number 2B resolution, can we change the percentage from 1.5 to 1%? I think could we change that on page 2 of 3, Mr. Loomer, and everything else on that resolution would stay the same?
Yes. Well, yeah, if you change it to 1%, you could leave the dollar figure there, or you could reduce it by the same that's in packet 1, because it's always the percentage or the dollar amount, whichever is less is what's used. But for clarification, probably, packet 1 has a 1% increase and a dollar amount, and you could use that same 1% increase in dollar amount in packet 2.
What would happen if you just eliminated the 1.5% and just listed the dollar amount?
You have to have a percentage, Commissioner
Yeah,
French,
okay.
as well as the number.
All right.
May I please ask Mr. Loomer to clarify that again? On packet number 2, are you suggesting that the board could change the present language and leave the 956,944.66 and change that to a 1% instead of 1.5?
Yes, you can do that.
And if we did that, Mr. Loomer, would everything else in resolution number 2 in packet number 2 remain the same?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, it would be.
And then if we were to go to the proposed motions that I have prepared on page 1 of packet number 2, the only change that the maker of the motion would make with regard to motion number 2 would be change the percent from 1.5 to 1%. Is that correct, Mr. Loomer?
Yes, it is.
And then one further question, Mr. Chairman. With regard to certifying the amount of revenue to be levied in 2020 for collection in 2021, in the 3rd resolution, the numbers would all remain the same. Is that correct, Mr. Loomer?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, because in either proposal, the levy certification proposed is slightly higher than the highest lawful. So again, the highest lawful would be the lowest number, which is what the county would be allowed to levy.
Okay.
These numbers don't have to be equal to. We always suggest that the levy certification be slightly higher, so that if other things change, then that number won't be your limitation, and the highest lawful becomes your limitation.
Very good. Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for anybody in the audience that would like to provide any testimony on the proposed levy rates as discussed and presented this morning. If you do want to provide testimony, I would give you 3 minutes to provide your testimony. And so first call for anybody in the audience wanting to provide any testimony on the proposed levy rates for 2021. Second call for anybody wanting to provide testimony on proposed levy rates for 2021. Third and final call for anybody wanting to provide testimony. Seeing and or hearing nobody when you provide testimony, I'm going to close the hearing on our levy rate and look to my fellow commissioners for direction. As indicated previously, Mr. Maceo has provided language for 3 motions to be made today. One is to establish substantial need. Motion 2 is increasing the tax revenue for 2020 to 2021. And motion number 3 is certifying the amount of taxes to be levied in 2020 for collection in 2021 in Spokane County for county purposes with the general fund, road fund, and conservation futures. So with that, then the chair is open to a motion on item number 1, declaring a substantial need. Anybody? Commissioner Cooney.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I hereby move that the board find a substantial need to increase the property tax revenue from 2020 to 2021 in order to discharge the expenses, obligations of Spokane County in conjunction with the general fund, county road fund, and conservation futures. Allow the county to increase the property tax revenue from the implicit price deflator of 0.60% to 1%. This motion is based upon various factors, including but not limited to increase in employer retirement contributions, increase in employer contributions towards healthcare plans, increase in criminal justice system expenditures, and implementation of unfunded mandates, including the 5 Commissioner bill, as well as Uniform Guardianship Act.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Do I have a second? I will second the motion. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Got, the ayes have it. Then moving on to motion number 2, increasing the tax revenue from 2020 to 2021. Chair is looking for a motion. Yeah, anybody?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to figure out which motion I'm choosing to do.
Two looks awfully attractive.
Packet 2 or motion 2?
Commissioner Cuny, Mr. Maceo speaking. We're looking at packet 2, motion 2, and I think Mr. Loomer identified that we could reduce the percentage in the general fund from 1.5% to 1%.
Yes. So, I just want to be clear that going to packet 2 versus packet 1, that it's for the average household, it's an increase of less than $3. Is that
The increase is $2.48.
No.
It's 10 cents per 1,000 of assessed value, correct?
Yeah, look at the top, Commissioner.
Yeah, and then when you,
it's a change of 1 cent per assessed value. So I'm just, yeah. So we are increasing from what we would have last year to this year of just the $2.48 a household on the average for the year.
yes,
That's not true now.
that is true. You've got it right on the top of your own form.
Commissioner Cuny, I'm sorry, Commissioner French. I asked Mr. Loomer to compute. I don't think he's presently on the phone. Is he?
He's still there.
Mr. Loomer, I asked you to compute the amount of increase per $1,000 if the board does the shift of $6.1 million from the bank capacity in the road fund to the general fund. And you advised me it would be 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So for a single family residence of $254,000, it would increase the annual property tax $25.23.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, yes, and so the difference between resolution 1
Oh, I'm sorry.
and resolution 2
I'm sorry.
is $2.48.
I'm sorry, Commissioner French. I was thinking that was for the total amount. I apologize, Chairman French.
Yes.
I wasn't listening.
Yes, so basically 20 cents a month.
So, yes, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, I hereby move that the board increase the regular property tax levy for levies to be collected in the 2021 tax year as follows. 956,944.66 for the general fund, which is 1% increase in revenue from the previous year. Is that, I'm supposed to say that correct? 1%?
Yep.
And then 6.1 million for the road fund, which is a 22.65 increase in revenue from the previous year. 22.65 represents 6.1 million shift in revenue from the road fund bank capacity to the general fund for any lawful purpose. The actual increase in the road fund levy will be 0%. However, the Washington State Department of Revenue has directed that the 6.1, which will be shifted from the road fund bank capacity to the general fund, be included in calculating total percentage increase in road fund levy from the previous year. The 6.1 represents all of the increase, and 21,472.39 for the conservation futures, which is a 1% increase in the revenue from the previous year. The above increases are exclusive of additional revenue resulting from new construction improvements to property, newly constructed wind turbines, and any increase in the value of state assessed properties, any annexations that occurred, and refunds made.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. So got a motion, looking for a second. I will second the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Cooney.
So I do. So when we talk about that, this is an increase in revenue from the previous year of 22.65. Is that really correct? Because we did the road shift of 5.5 last year. So it's not, we're not increasing that full 22%. We did the shift. So in my mind, we're not making this, again, I'm trying to look at from last year to this year for a taxpayer. They're really not seeing much of a change other than that 2.4, $2.48.
Commissioner CUNY, I would ask Mr. Loomer to comment on that. Dave, could you please address Commissioner CUNY's observation?
The Department of Revenue asks us to word it in this way, that we're actually increasing the road levy by whatever, 22, whatever %, but then we're moving that to the general fund. So the 6.1 million is not really being collected in the road levy, it's being collected in the general levy. And I've gone back and forth with the Department of Revenue about this. We're not really increasing the road levy, we're increasing the general levy, but this is the way they require us to word it in a document.
Okay. I guess I just want to make sure that for the public, I mean, we're not doing much differently than we did last year. That we're just doing a very minor increase of the $2.48 per house, on an average households for the year. So again, I think those numbers just kind of make it seem, a lot more, and that's not the case. So I understand you have to do it for Department of Revenue purposes, but I just want the public to know that we are trying very hard to take care of our expenses and cover those expenses in the ways that we can without trying to increase taxes, as trying to get the least amount of tax increase to the public.
So Commissioner Cooney, I would agree with you 100%. And for the difference between last year and this year being about $2.48, and with the increased cost that we're going to be subjected to, not only as it's articulated in the motions and the bills, but the other obligation out there that we do not have quantified is what kind of additional support is the health district going to require as we try and work our way through this pandemic? And there doesn't at this point appear to be any kind of relief coming from the federal government or from the state. So not knowing what that potential liability might be, I think this is a very, very conservative approach to making sure that we can try and meet those needs and keep our community safe, as well as trying to address some of the other unfunded mandates, including the 5 commissioner bill. You know, I will point out that we have collectively received about a half a dozen emails from folks that are saying, make sure you fully fund the 5 commissioner districting committee for next year. You know, that's it's another one of those big unfunded mandates that we're going to be confronted with and stuff. So I agree with you 100% that this difference between last year and this year is really de minimis compared to the obligations that we're having to face, and some of the other budget reductions that we'll talk about next week. That you know, we're skinnying up the operation to try and be as fiscally conservative as we can. So I agree with you 100%. So, any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Nay.
So the ayes have it. So motion 1 and motion 2 pass. That gets us to motion number 3, certifying the amount of taxes to be levied in 2020 for collection in 2021. Looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I hereby move to certify to the Spokane County Assessor the following amounts of taxes to be levied in 20 or 2021.
2020.
Be levied in
Okay.
2020 to be collected in 2021.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Upon property in Spokane County for collection in 2021 for county purposes. Thank you. And the levy amount in 2020 for the collection in 2021 will be 61,500,000 plus 6.1 million shifted from the road levy banked capacity, which was not collected in previous years, for a total of 67 million. For the road fund, the levy amount for 2020 for the 2021 will be 29 million. For conservation futures, the levy amount in 2020 for the collection in 2021 will be 2.3 million.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney, for the motion. I've got a motion. Do I have a second? I will second the motion. So any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. So that's all the business coming before the board for our levy hearing. So at this point, I can close the hearing, or do I need to leave the hearing open for budget discussion next week?
Chairman French, that concludes the board's action on this particular item. I think, Mr. Petrovich, you have miscellaneous. I know you have other items. You do have the ability under miscellaneous to talk about budget items if you want to at the end of this particular meeting this morning. He may want some additional thinking of the board as he moves forward to your budget hearing a week from today.
Okay, very good. So then I'm going to close the hearing, and then we move on to item number 6, Mr. Tim Hansen and Mr. Randy Withrow. And this is an executive session item for the purposes of discussing labor negotiations. We will move into executive session at 10:45 and be in executive session for approximately 20 minutes or until 11:05. Present in the executive session shall be our senior management staff, Mr. Tim Hansen, Mr. Randy Withrow. I'm assuming Mr. Chris Anderson is going to be joining us, as well as Mr. Amacio. And so with that, then we will move into executive session until 11:05.
Gina, you're the host now on that end, FYI.
What's that?